Yep, what is going on, guys? It is Will back with another video. Today we're going to be talking about something actually really interesting and something everybody should know. Even if you're not a trader, this is something you should know because this will affect your life. A lot of people don't follow these certain types of articles or certain types of data. Even though it affects your daily life, it kind of makes no sense to me, right? So you're just going on about life, la da 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 da, and just not giving a fuck about anything. Um, Personally, that's not how I like to run my life. I hope you don't either. I hope you like to take control of it and use every advantage that you can possible, because all the information is out there for you. It's just up to yourself to go and look for it and go and educate yourself. But also, that's what these videos are for educational purposes. Okay, so we're going to be talking about interest rates. Um, so if you don't, okay, so what interest rates are, right? Let's break it down. Very simple here. Interest rates is something released by the Fed, and they dictate kind of like the bank's loan percentage, like what they're capped out at. Um, so, right, interest rates are basically, like credit cards, mortgages, any type of loans that you get from a bank, student loans, stuff like that. Those are loans, right? And attached to those loans are interest rates, something you pay back over time. As you know, right, before COVID struck, or even right during COVID, a little bit after COVID, interest rates were at an all-time low. Like, you could, like, for example, I know some people who were able to finance a house with, like, a 1.9% rate. That shit is never gonna happen again. Like, that is fucking insane. Like, it is crazy, just to think about that. So if you do have a house around 1 to 3%, congratulations, you're probably never going to see those interest rates again. Maybe one day we'll see, like, maybe 3%. But so if you, at that time, interest rates were at an all-time low. Now I want you to think of it like this. Right, so I'm going to just draw something here, and I'm going to draw this here. So one side you have your interest rates, and then the other side you have your inflation. Okay? What inflation is just means the dollar is worth less than what it was a certain amount of time ago. So you have your inflation rate and your interest rate. And these two, they have something called a negative correlation. Now what that means is when one goes up, one goes down. So if inflation is up, interest rates go down. So why were interest rates, 1.9% on 30-year mortgages? Because inflation was breaking all-time highs. And now we're coming to a point where it's a nice area where we're at right now. I think the economy overall, I think we're in a good area to not even talk about cutting rates. I'm not sure why we're planning on cutting rates. This also does have to do with politics too. If you don't like politics, it doesn't matter who you're voting for. I could fucking care less. At the end of the day, I'm gonna make my money. I just feel bad for the people who have to suffer through all this. But you have to keep in mind, this does have to do with a political move. If the Fed wants to, please the Democrats, something they would do is cut rates. For example, when Trump was in office, the Feds gave him a rate. They gave him a point. So it was to please him. This is something that is very common. If you don't like it, grow up. This is just how it is. Or move to a different country. I don't know what to tell you. This is just how it is. This is how we operate. I wish it wasn't like that, but we got to deal with it. There's worse things. So, when interest rates are coming down, inflation is going up. When inflation is coming down, interest rates are going up. Now, there is a happy medium between the two. To calculate something like this, we use something called CPI. What CPI is, it stands for Consumer Price Index. And also they're using something called PCE now, which is personal consumption expenditures or something like that. It's something a little newer they're using. It has to do, regardless, both of them have to do with, how people are spending their money, if they are spending their money. But that's what it means. So just to give you some data, we got the CPI from this month, or, year to year. We got it on the 13th, I believe. And it actually came out around 2.5%, versus last year was at 3.7%. So I think right now we're in a good area. Inflation does average, if you didn't know, inflation does average about 2.9% a year. Inflation's not going to be 0%. It's something that slowly happens over time, especially when you're printing money out of thin air. That only messes it up more. But, let's talk about what would happen if they did decide to cut rates. So right now it's up in the air. I've just seen an article yesterday saying most analysts are preparing for a 2 rate cut, which means they'll cut rate by two. Now what that means, for just hypothetically speaking, let's say the interest rates are stuck at 10%, right? And they want to cut it by 2. That would just make it 8%. This is also called a 0.50. It's called a 0.50 BPS. So if you are taking notes on us, this is something I'd write down. It's called a 0.50 BPS. Now that is around, I think I saw it around 66% of analysts said they're going to cut it by 2. And then the 33% said they're going to cut it by 1, which would be a 0.25 BPS. Personally, I don't think we need to cut rates, but obviously there's political, we're going to leave the politics out of it, but there's political reasons for this. I don't think we should cut rates at this point. So I was reading an article. So the last time inflation soared was in the 70s and the 80s. The feds raised the rates, right? Just like they did with COVID. When COVID happened, inflation started soaring. So what they do? The Fed raised the rates. This is how we battle against inflation. And then once inflation starts coming down, the Fed will slowly start to decrease rates. We haven't had a rate cut in a while, so this is why it's a little... And especially that they want to cut it by 2. Or, that's what analysts are saying, but it could... I was expecting 1, but now I could see 2 being on the fence. If we cut 2 rates here, we could result in something called a double dip of inflation. Which is, I know they're trying to stay away from this, but this is something that could potentially happen. If they cut rates again, we could just soar back up to inflation. We won't feel this, obviously. We won't feel it right away. We'll feel it in the next couple years. But this is something just to keep in mind. Now, what do you do to counter inflation? What do you do to counter inflation? Well, I'll tell you one thing. One way to counter inflation is not by leaving your money in a savings account. Okay? This is why you're supposed to invest your money. If the average inflation is 3%, and something like the S&P index averages about 12% a year, why are you keeping your money in a savings account that's getting burnt through by inflation? This is why it's important to know this type of information. But yeah, I mean, that's my little lesson on interest rates and inflation. If you do have any questions about any of this stuff, you could feel free to hit me in the DM. I'd be happy to break it down to you. And then we could just go over everything, what you don't understand. It's very basic stuff once you learn it. And it should be used in your life regularly. Obviously, you're not looking at inflation every single day, but something like this big news where rate cuts are quite possible, are going to happen. They're going to happen tomorrow. How can it affect your life in a year or two? Because it will affect your life in a year or two. If you're not prepared for something like this in a year or two, you're just going to suffer. But yeah, I mean, if you do have any questions about any, sorry to be like so negative about it, but it's just true because, I see it all the time. People stack their money in their savings account and they just don't realize how much they're chopping their own legs off. You work so hard to put $20,000 in the bank, and every year inflation is killing it on average 3%. Even a high dividend save or a high yield savings account that earns you 6%, at least you're beating inflation. Don't keep it in a savings account. Just don't. There's other ways to go about it. If you want more information on that, hit me up. I'll be able to help you out with that as well too. But I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I took one trade today on NQ. I'm not really going to recap it. I did make money, but I'm not really going to recap NQ. That's not what I'm here for. We'll talk about it a different day, but I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Later.